functions, verb phrase. We've been discussing verb phrase so many times, but now let's look at the function this verb phrase plays in a sentence. So we have 1 to 7 sentence, the same sentence. The tram read the diary, he laughed, he turned a page. So if we look at this, that all these sentences have a combination of a noun phrase and a verb phrase, and the verb phrase have different constituent or different complements. So on the basis of the complement, we categorize the into subcategorization to these lexical verb. In 7, if you see that we have he in round brackets, as in the text this sentence was having an elliptic element, so on the basis of our understanding of the passage, we used he for this sentence. So the first NP in 7, as I said, is elliptic. So we used and we knew that it is a combination of an NP and VP. So we put, according to the context, a third person pronoun in this place. So each clause contains a VP preceded by an NP and is reflected by one of the phrase structures rule of English, which are a sentence consists of an NP and a VP, a noun phrase and a verb phrase. So if you look at this, you can see that this sentence has a noun phrase and a verb phrase. So NP is dominated by S and VP is also dominated by S, right? So the first NP is the subject, right? In the traditional terminology, it's a subject, and the VP is predicate. So we have two units of the sentence, subject and predicate. So lexical verbs can be classified according to the types of complementations they take. For example, a verb may take an object, a noun phrase, or may take a prepositional phrase, or may take a noun phrase and a noun phrase, or may not take any noun phrase, right? So on the basis of what they take and what they do not take, we can subcategorize these lexical verbs, right? So if we look at this, we can see that we have different frames. For example, in A, we don't find anything coming after the verb phrase. Like he laughed, we don't have any noun phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, or anything like. So it is an intransitive verb. So similarly, in the B, we have a copula verb, which may have an adjective phrase, a noun phrase, a prepositional phrase, as the sentence shows. So this is again a subcategorization. Monotransitive, a verb phrase can have a noun phrase or a sentence, right? So a ditransitive verb like give may have two noun phrases or one noun phrase or a prepositional phrase, like he gave the girl a book, right? If we change he gave a book to the girl, so in that case it will be noun phrase and a prepositional phrase. Complex verb, a verb phrase followed by a noun phrase and followed by an adjective phrase or a noun phrase. He called him a fool, right? So intransitive, verb phrase followed by a prepositional phrase, right? In which prepositional phrase is an obligatory unit, right? So he leaned towards the girl, so towards the girl must come after leaned. So it's an intransitive verb. So then we have transitive verb followed by a prepositional phrase like put, right? So put must have a noun phrase and a prepositional phrase. He put his head on her shoulder. So we must have a prepositional phrase, otherwise the sentence won't sound correct. It is important to point out that the verb itself may contain more than one word. I mean, not the auxiliary verb that we generally take or modal auxiliary. Rather, two words form a unit of the verb, lexical verb. For example, he went out. So went and out both are part of the word, or so they make one lexical verb. We call them phrasal verb, we know. Similarly, he gave up smoking, so gave up is a 1 unit. So go out is a multi-word verb which takes no complement, whereas give up is a multi-word verb which takes an noun a phrase as a complement. So we will write it like this: go out, noun phrase with no noun phrase or prepositional phrase after it. Give up, a verb phrase followed by a noun phrase. Subcategorization frames are not based on syntactic information only, right? We do not give this subcategorization on the basis of their syntactic information. Rather, we also look at their meaning. For example, the meaning of the lexical verb also plays a very important role in this. So whenever we look at a verb, we know that which subcategory it belongs to. So for example, generally we talked about verb and we say that verbs express activities of some kind, but term activities is interpreted in so many ways, right? To include such events, happening, states of affair and situation as are expressed by verbs like die, dream, fall, hate, possesses, resemble. So different word express different different meanings. So these meaning also determine their category, subcategory. So activities usually involve one or more than one participant. For example, if we take the verb kill, right? So we must have someone who does this action, and we also have someone on whom the action is carried out. In other words, we must have an agent and we must also have a patient, right? So we must have an agent and patient, but with many other verbs we do not need a patient. Obviously, when we talk about agent and patient, we mean the subject and the object. So John killed the tramp. So we know that John is the agent and tramp is the patient. The constituent John and the tramp are respectively the subject and of the sentence, and the tramp is the complement of the verb. A subcategorization frame can be seen as a grammatical specification of a verb, which also reflects the semantic content, that is the meaning of the verb. So let's look at the grammatical function, right? So if we have the sentence like the girl showed the diary to the tramp, we can also make the tramp showed the diary to the girl, right? So the constituent are changed and the sentence remains the same: noun phrase, verb phrase, and then we have noun phrase and prepositional phrase. So the same can be put into the brackets: noun phrase, verb phrase, noun phrase and prepositional phrase. So we can also show the same through a sentence tree diagram. The tramp is a noun phrase, right, dominated by S, and we have past show, which is show is the past tense that shows tense, and it is dominated by the verb phrase. And then we have a noun phrase, the diary, dominated by verb phrase. Then we have a prepositional phrase, to the girl, which is dominated by the verb phrase, right? So in this sentence we have changed the constituent of the first sentence. Instead of the tramp as a subject, now we have the girl as a subject, right? So there are certain movements that we have made in this tree diagram. The trees are identical, but the lexical items are different, right? So the difference in the position of the NPs clearly has an effect on the behavior of such NPs in the sentence. The girl showed the tramp the diary. This operation is called dative movement. When we change the tramp with the diary, so we made certain movements, right? We'll discuss this movement in detail on its place, right? So constituent are said to have different grammatical functions. So when we look at the constituent of the sentence, they have different grammatical function, like that of direct object, receiving direct action of the verb, indirect object like receiving for whom the action was done, and similarly doing the action or the activity, that is the subject, right? So the old traditional terminology also help us sometime to understand these constituent very clearly. However, we in descriptive grammar we do them in our own way to understand that how actually things move and go ahead in their manner.